Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is 7 o'clock by that clock that Rob wound up only 20 minutes ago. I assume it's still on time, Rob. So it's 7 o'clock. We'll make a start. And if I'm swaying, colleagues, it's not because I'm drunk. It's because the reflection is bang on the clock. So if I lean this way, I can see the time. If I don't, I can't. Anyway, welcome to the meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee. First of all, I must read out the security statement. Welcome to today's meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. And that brings us on to item 1, appointment of substitutes. Margaret.
Yes, Chairman, we have Councillor Bissett for Councillor Piotrowski, Councillor Shafaz Ditter for Councillor McKay, and we should have Councillor Ali for Councillor Barnes, but he may be delayed. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Margaret. Welcome all those new members. It's nearly half the committee, but you're all very welcome. Item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member have any declaration of interest? Councillor Bayliss.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, but I'm just a bit surprised. You can't actually substitute for a meeting you're not actually at. The piece of paper has to be delivered in advance, yes, which has been done, I assume, but the member isn't here to substitute. So just a little constitutional question there about the ability, if you're not here, you're not really substituting. We have a rule. You have to be in place by the start of the meeting to substitute. That's what the Constitution has always looked at in the past. I'm wondering now we're essentially flying blind on that one, but it's a point of about the Constitution, really.
Thank you, Councillor Bayliss. That's an interesting point. If it's a constitutional matter, I'll ask Ms Stroud for her comments.
Through you, Chair, I wouldn't want to fly blind at the Audit and Governance Committee. I need to just consider that point about if you're not available at the start of the meeting. I'll just double check that point. I think that all committee services was trying to do was just note Councillor Barnes' absence and the intended substitution. Clearly the minutes will not record a substitution if one has not taken place. I will check your point about the start time. I'll check that now.
Members, if we just pause for a few seconds, because I think it is important we get it clear now, in case Councillor Ali turns up and then you might be told he can or cannot be a substitute. So can we just clarify that before we go any further? Just bear with us a second. Right, apparently it might be more than a few seconds. So I suggest we carry on with the agenda and then if anything happens, Ms Stroud will alert me. Right, item 3, public participation. Margaret?
There is none, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 4, minutes. The minutes of the meeting of the 21st of September. Can I please sign these as a correct record? Are there any questions or comments thereon before I do so? No, they're a correct record. Could we just have a show of hands of agreement on that? Those of us who are here. Thank you very much. That takes on to item 5. Actually, Mr. Roheman is here earlier than expected. You obviously didn't come by train. So what I would suggest, colleagues, is we move that item first. It should normally be at the beginning, but we can now bring it to the beginning because Mr. Roheman is here, which is item 8, which is the external audit report and letter of representation. Mr. Baldwin, if you could introduce the report first, please, and then we'll, I'm sure, have quite a useful debate on that item.
Thank you. This is the report that concludes the external audit for the year 2020-21. As we've discussed at these meetings before, this is somewhat later than we would normally have expected this. But if we just run through the recommendations of the report, I think the purpose will then become self-evident. First of all, for the committee to consider the recommendations and responses in the external auditor's report, hence Mr. Rahimian is here to discuss it. And that the committee then reviews the proposed letter of representation that the external auditors require from the chair of this committee and the Section 151 officer. And finally, that the committee then approves the delegation to the chairman and corporate director of finance and resources to approve the final statement of accounts once those have been prepared. The report summarises the key points that come out of the Ernst & Young report, which is the appendix. In paragraph 3.2.2, it summarises the adjustments that we've been required to make following the auditor's findings. And I don't propose to go through each of those. Some of those are quite technical, but we have agreed each of those following some discussion. And once those have been approved, then, as I say, the final accounts will be prepared and will be approved by the chair and director of finance. Letter of representation that the auditors are asking for is a standard requirement that we do each year, and there's nothing that's changed significantly in that from previous years. I think on that point, Chair, we're ready to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. Before we start, any questions to Mr. Baldwin on those general comments? Otherwise, we'll go over to you, Mr. O'Heeman, please. Could I just clarify, because on the copy I had, Mr. Baldwin, you will recall, it was rather optimistic. It said the year ended 31st of March 2022. I assume that's now been corrected on a later edition.
Yes, Chair. Thank you for spotting that. And yes, it has been corrected.
Thank you. Right. Well, I think we are where we are. Right, Mr. Rahimian, over to you, please. And again, thank you for your report. And if you just present it, and then we'll go through it as usual, section by section, please. Then members can deal with it accordingly.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So, as Mr. Baldwin has outlined, this is our audit results report for the audit of the 2021 financial statements. Overall, we're going to be issuing an unqualified opinion on the financial statements and no matters to report in respect of arrangements for securing value for money. Section 1 of the report just provides a summary of our scope, the status of the audit, the auditor differences, and our other reporting issues and our responsibilities under the Code of Audit Practice. There's one unadjusted difference that have been identified during the course of the audit, which management have chosen not to adjust for. That has a net impact of 393,000, which is below our materiality levels and relates to NNDR appeals provisions. We're satisfied with management's decision not to adjust for that, but the reason for not adjusting should be included within the letter of representation, which is going to be on the grounds of materiality. Section 2 of the report summarises the areas of risk which were outlined within our audit plan.
Sorry, Mr. Rahim, if I could just interrupt you at that point. If we do it section by section, and I'll ask colleagues if they have any questions or comments on the first section, which is the, as you say, largely the executive summary. Do members have any questions or comments on the first section, which is the executive summary? No? All clear? Content? Happy? Right. Mr. Rahman, over to you then, please. Section 2.
Thank you, Chair. Section 2 of the report outlines the risks and areas of focus which were included within our audit plan. They summarise what the risks are, the procedures that we undertook in response to those risks, and the conclusions that we have come to having undertaken the work. So I'll pause there in case any members have any questions on section 2.
Thank you. Do members of the committee have any questions or comments on section 2? No. In that case, Mr. Rahim, section 3, please.
Section 3 of the report is the opinion which we're proposing to issue. So it's a draft of the opinion. So as I said, it's an unqualified opinion. Again, I'll pause there in case any members have any questions.
Members of the committee, any questions or comments on section 3? No. Mr. Rahim, next section, please. Section 4.
So section 4 of the report summarises the amendments which have been made as a result of which management have agreed to make as a result of the audit, and they were outlined within the summary paper which Mr. Baldwin went through earlier. There are 4 adjustments which are highlighted within the report. The first to do with understatement of grant income. The second, overstatement of other creditor balances. The third, understatement of land and buildings valuations. And the fourth is just a reclassification from one line of creditors to another within the financial statements. Again, I'll pause there in case any members have any questions in relation to those.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from members of the committee? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. It's just, would the value of the building and the land not go up each year anyway? Is that just a natural increase?
The values of land and buildings may go up. It's not kind of for certain that they will. The issue which has arisen in relation to this particular element was because there was, in undertaking the valuation, the council's valuer, in our view, didn't include a particular part of the building as part of the valuation, and also we engaged our internal specialist to support us as an audit team, and our internal specialist had advised us that the land value which was being used was below what they would have expected.
Thank you. It is quite a lot of money. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rahim. Any other questions or comments on section 4?
I think what I would say in terms of local government accounts, any kind of increases in land and buildings, they do get reversed out, so they don't actually have an impact on the council's overall financial position.
Thank you, Mr. Rahim. Councillor Bayliss.
I'd like to withdraw my previous question. Having reread the Constitution, it's simply notification before the meeting, which notification was clearly given. So it's not attendance before. You can attend late.
Right. Sorry. So for the benefit of everybody, Ms. Stroud, can you just clarify the actual position, the constitutional position?
Yes, thank you. This is the Audit and Governance Committee in real time, isn't it? So part 5, the committee rules of procedure set out a procedure, as Councillor Bayliss has said, for notification of a substitute before a meeting, and we have confirmation from Democratic Services that's been adhered to. The committee procedure rules are silent about late arrival, and I can only conclude, having a quick look at the legislation too, that being silent on the definition of attendance, that it is at the discretion of the chair to admit late arrivals. So therefore, it would be permissible to allow Councillor Ali to participate in the meeting at your discretion, Chair, when he arrives.
Thank you very much. So it's a discretionary matter. It may be something that council might want to, not tonight, I can assure you, on a future occasion, just make a decision on one way or the other. But we'll play that by ear, since Councillor Ali is going to be late regardless of anything anyway. Thank you for clarifying that. Mr. Rahim, apologies for that, but these constitutional matters can be awkward sometimes. But we're on item 5, value for money.
Yeah, very, very important that we it's the right and proper things done.
You have to do things correctly and hold it.
Section 5 of the, moving on to section 5 of the report, it summarises our responsibilities in respect of value for money. Under the new code, the 2020 code, we no longer have a responsibility to issue an opinion or a conclusion on value for money arrangements. We just report by exception. So if we identify a significant weakness, we would report on an exception basis in our opinion that we've identified a significant weakness, which would then be a modified or qualified opinion. So we haven't identified any significant weaknesses in arrangements, so hence it's a unqualified opinion in which we are intending to issue. We do, once this audit results report is issued, we have a responsibility to issue an auditor's annual report, and contained within the auditor's annual report there'll be more detailed commentary on the value for money arrangements. But as I said, we haven't identified any significant weaknesses in arrangements, so it's a clean opinion from that respect. But again, happy to take any questions on section 5.
Thanks, Mr. Rahim. I mean, obviously, value for money is really central to everything we do, isn't it? In every sense. So, could you just expand a bit where you seem to be implying that it's lost its importance, as it were?
It hasn't lost necessarily its importance. So the work that we do and the criteria that we assess the arrangements are, if anything, slightly expanded from the previous code. But what we no longer do is provide a conclusion. We just report on an exception basis. So I think de facto, if you haven't got any significant weaknesses reported within the VFM conclusion, then it's as I said, it's a clean opinion, which is a good thing.
Thank you. Well, that's encouraging. Any questions or comments from members of the committee on that? No. Item 6 then, Mr. Rahim, please.
So section 6 outlines that we've got a responsibility to provide an opinion on the consistency of the financial statements, and also looking at the annual governance statements, whether the annual governance statement is consistent with our knowledge of the authority. We also have to complete a whole of government accounts return for the council. The council's below the materiality limit, so it's in terms of the whole of government accounts. So it's not an area where we'll need to be doing any additional work. So once we've got completed our work on, got the final set of financial statements, we'll then submit the whole of government accounts return. And as external auditors, we do have a number of statutory powers, and in looking at undertaking our audit, there are no instances where we need to exercise any of those statutory powers in terms of any reporting issues. Again, happy to take any questions on section 6 of the report.
Thank you. Again, members of the committee, any questions, comments? Item section 7. Sorry, section 6 rather. Right, section 7. Mr. Rahim, please. Assessment of control environment.
Yeah, section 7. So in undertaking our audit, we haven't undertaken a controls-based approach. We've undertaken a substantive approach, but we do have a responsibility to report and back to the committee if we do identify any weaknesses in internal controls. We haven't identified any weaknesses in internal controls which you're not already aware of through the work of internal audit, for example.
Thank you very much. Any questions on comments on section 7? Right, that takes us to section 8, Mr. Rahim, data analytics. Now, can you please explain this in simple language for an ordinary person like me to understand? It's quite technical, this, but if we can just at least understand what you're saying, we may agree or not agree, but at least we need to understand it.
So in undertaking our audit, we do get a download of the council's whole ledger, and that download is inputted into our data analytics tools. What that allows us to do is to direct our audit to particular risk areas, and also focus our work on areas such as journal entries and the payroll. So in order to using that data to direct our testing into areas of audit risk, and also using the analysis to provide assurance on for transactions such as payroll, where you'd expect there to be month by month fairly a high level of degree of consistency. So it gives us that insight and enables us to interrogate your data and gain assurance from that, or to direct our testing from areas of risk.
Thank you, Ms. Rahim. I think I understood that as well. Well done. Any questions or comments from members of the committee? No? Councillor Ditter?
It's just a quick question, really. The information that you download, is there a certain type of security protocol that you have in place that... Yeah, sorry. Is there any security protocols that you have put in place that you make sure that it doesn't get leaked?
Yeah, so all of the data that we download is obtained through secure channels. So it's through our portal, and as a firm, we do have data security policies in place to ensure that all data is safeguarded.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Takes on to item 9, independence.
So section 9 of the report, we confirm our independence. There are no issues that we're aware of which will compromise our independence. We also provide a summary of the...
Sorry, just bear with me a second, Graham. Someone put your stand off it. Amazing, isn't it? Technology for you.
Yeah.
So you don't want it to...
Just checking my phone.
Go, apologies for that, carry on.
That's okay. So in terms of independence, there are no issues that compromise our independence. We also, within section 9, outline the fees position. We're anticipating discussing additional, well, we will be discussing additional fees with management. They haven't yet, those discussions haven't yet occurred. And once following on from those discussions with management, we'll come back to the audit committee. If management don't agree to any additional fees, then they will be kind of put to the PSA for determination, similarly to how it was done for the 2019-20 audit.
Thank you. Any questions on that section from colleagues on the committee? No? Right, let's take item, well, section 10, appendices. Is there anything you want to add, Mr. Rahim, on that? I guess it will be covered in the previous sections.
The appendices, it covers our reporting responsibilities and how we've discharged those responsibilities. And we just, within Appendix B, outlined there that outstanding procedures, which are just a receipt of the final version of the financial statements. Once the committee has agreed to those amendments today, the letter of representation, and then just before we issue our opinion, we'll do a subsequent events review as well.
Thank you.
No other points from me. I haven't taken any questions.
Points or questions to Mr. Rahim on that? Ms. Rahim, thank you very much for that. Could I just ask a general question? I think it would be helpful, just really without wishing to get into too much detail or time on it. But could you just update us on where we are with generally with the audit. Obviously, we're unusually, because of circumstances, behind where we should be. So could you just please update the committee on where we are and really your understanding of where we should be?
So significantly behind where we would want you to be, and I know where the council and the committee would want us to be in respect of undertaking the audit. I think, as we've communicated previously, there are significant challenges within the local government public sector external audit market in general. There's issues of capacity within the external audit profession. As a firm, we are investing significantly in terms of recruitment, and recruitment is a challenge. We've had a number of new people joining us as a firm, and we've got a kind of active campaign at the moment to secure additional resources. But it is a challenging market out there at this moment in time. Having completed the 2021 audit, we're now going to be looking to undertake work for the 21-22 audit. Again, it's not going to be at the time when ideally we would have been undertaking it, and it's going to be some time before we're in a position to actually start catching up on the audits which are running behind where we want them to be. It's not a position which is just facing ourselves as a firm. It's a position which is impacting all auditors of particularly of local government bodies, and I think that's a summary of where we are, Chair.
Yes, thank you for that. I mean, in your opinion, currently where we stand, when do you think we will be up to date? I know it's a bit of a difficult question, but I think members are really straining to know when we're going to be up to the position where we should be.
I think it is a position where when you're significantly behind where you want to be, then trying to make sure that you're getting things in place to address that does take some time. So I don't think it will be. We're looking to try to get to aiming to get to a position where we've caught up on things within a period of 18 months, I'd say. I've highlighted that we are, as a firm, looking to increase the number of resources that we have in recruitment into our public sector teams, and one of the factors for that is looking to make sure that we get more people in to address the audits which are outstanding at this moment in time, to get us to a position where they're concluded and we can move on as we want to move on, and be ensuring that the audit timetable is back in line with where local authorities want that to be as well.
Yes, thank you. Just a final point, Mr. Rahim. I mean, obviously, the more behind the audit is and the longer it takes to catch up, is there a risk that the information won't be as valuable? I mean, people's memories, fade, people leave, they're not there to ask, to confirm. So is there not a risk in itself of the audit being a year or two, even 2 years late, with no necessarily clear date of when it's going to be up to date?
I think that's been been highlighted within a number of reviews that have taken place. Having a timely audit completed close after the year end does provide stakeholders with a greater level of assurance, and there are governance implications for audits that aren't completed as close to year end as all stakeholders would want.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Rahim, for that. Thank you. Yeah. Any questions on that, probably can't take that discussion any further, but I think it's a source of concern. Right. In that case then, do members have any questions or comments on the letter of representation before we deal with the recommendations? No? Right, there being none, in that case, could I move the recommendations then? 1.1, the Audit and Governance Committee consider the findings, recommendation reports in the External Auditor's report. 1.2, the committee reviews the proposed letter of representation, endorses the content and recommends approval by the Council's statutory officers. 1.3, the committee approves the delegation of the approval of the final statement of accounts to the chair of this committee and the corporate director, finance and resources. Those in favour of the recommendations, please. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Mr. Rahim, as always, nice to see you. Very welcome to stay, but you may wish to leave, but you're welcome to stay.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to see you all and to be here in person, but I will make my departure now. Thank you.
Yes, that's a very good point. It's been some time since we sat here around the table as actual people rather than what's the term? Virtual people. I don't know what a virtual person is. You're either a person or you're not. But again, nice to see you. All the best. Right, colleagues. Let's move on. Right, that takes us on now. Just having dealt with that, that's very handy. Item 5, the Internal Audit Progress Report 2022-23. Mr. Bromwich, over to you, as always. If it's technology, I can give you a lesson. No, you can't do that. I can show you.
Right. Well, yeah, quite. It's usually done for me, but there we are. Anyway,
Mr. Bromwich, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is our progress report for internal audit. It was written at the end of October. It essentially informs members of the continuing progress in regards to the 22-23 plan and brings to your attention any risk or potential risks or exceptions worth noting. So the headlines within the report really are the 22-23 reviews. We've got two reviews since you last sat at draft stage, and we've got 5 ongoing reviews. So those will be reported before committee in due course as soon as they're completed. The rolling programme for some of the core financials has continued with the outcomes to be reported in Q4. So we usually do the core financials in Q3 because of the sampling methodology that we use. It gives us a much broader base that we can work with. Regarding National Fraud Initiative, NFI, we completed all of the uploads and the data set uploads by the 18th of November 2022, so that was the deadline that we set, and all of those were uploaded by that date. There are 2 further data set uploads to take place, which is due to take place in January 23, and those are for electoral services and council tax single person discount. So we're expecting those to go through in January. WIAS so internal audit will be playing an advisory coordinating role in regards to those, and we'll be reporting back before committee in March in regards to the actions taken for NFI. In regards to those data sets that have already been uploaded, we're awaiting the results of those, and as soon as we receive those will go out to the relevant services for any potential investigations to take place. Follow-ups have continued. There are 2 reported in your bundle tonight at Appendix 3 on page 13. I'm pleased to report that all of the actions in regards to those reports have been implemented. So as we report by exception, from my perspective, there are no exceptions to report this evening regarding the follow-up actions that have been taken. Also in the report, appendices 1 and 2, your pages 8 and 9 of the bundle provides an overview of progress with a summary of the days used against budgeted days, as well as a full oversight of the 22-23 plan and the ongoing progress that is being made in regards to delivering against that plan. So because it's the full plan, it gives a holistic view of where we are in delivering that. So in summary, assurance can be given on the continuing progress against the 22-23 plan. There's a fair large volume of work progressing through to a completed position, and that will be reported in due course as the actual reviews are finalised. The NFI data set uploads, phase 1 has been completed, and those are all completed by the deadline. Phase 2 will be uploaded in January 23. That's in hand at the moment, but we'll keep an overview on that to make sure that those are uploaded on time. And as far as the follow-up outcomes are concerned, there are no exceptions to report. Take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bromwich. Yeah, could you just advise the committee on, obviously, car parking? It's a matter of not just concern to the committee, I think probably the whole city. What work you will be doing to look into that situation and where we'll be going as a result?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, we do have some budgeted days in the plan. More work to be done in regards to the issues that were encountered earlier in the year. There is some technical information that is being awaited, and as soon as that comes through and we have the whole position in regards to the difficulties that were encountered, I think that will be the time that it will be most beneficial for any internal audit work to be completed. So that could well run into next financial year, but it will be part of the plan regardless.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. But obviously, the committee will expect a particular report on that to come to this committee, bearing in mind what has happened. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Chair. No, there's nothing to add at this stage. As Andy suggested, we're still going through various processes, including some important legal discussions with the various parties, and we'll wait until those have progressed to a key point before we bring a detailed report to the committee.
Thank you. Right. Thank you, Mr. Bromwich. As always, very, very clear. Any questions or comments from members of the committee? Councillor Bissett, then Councillor Bayliss.
I'm new in this area, and I find it very useful if somebody could explain to me what NNDR is and WIASS. And I think it'd be very useful as a general policy if these things were written out in full and then the initials put in brackets on the first time they're used for people like me who are here as subs. Yes, and well, you are like me.
Right. Mr. Bromwich, I think this is a point I made some years ago, but because I know what they are, I haven't asked. But yeah, if you could just tell what tell.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, NNDR is national non-domestic rates. Sorry? National non-domestic rates. Business rates. And WIAS is Worcestershire Internal Audit Shared Service.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll try and remember those next.
Thank you, Chair. They'll be quite common, Marjorie, those two. They'll come up quite frequently in audit. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Bayliss.
Thank you, Chairman. I was only going to ask about the internal audit days versus actual. We were 100. I know it's. I couldn't work out whether we were slightly ahead of where you thought we'd be or slightly behind, because we look like we've used about 200 by October, and we've still got 5 months left. So are we going to get our full 300, or are we going to get some freebies as well in order to make the numbers add up, or how's it going to go, Andy?
So just for half a second, gentlemen, Councillor Ali has arrived. So just for the record, what I'm going to do is exercise my discretion at this point, because it has been delayed, and any other consequential constitutional matters can be discussed and resolved elsewhere rather than the middle of a meeting this evening. Sorry, Mr. Bromwich.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think by the end of the financial year, we'll be there or thereabouts in regards to the days. We do keep an eye on it, and some of these days are in fact what amounts to discretionary type days. So they're built into the plan, and they may be used, they may not. It depends on what comes through. So if we were to have, for sake of argument, we've actually built into the plan some days for investigations, but if there are no investigations taking place during the financial year, we may not use those days. So it does fluctuate. We are in a particularly heavy quarter, Q3, because we're looking at the core financials. So we will see a continuing increase in the number of days reported and used. But at the end of the financial year, it'll be there or thereabouts.
Councillor Bailey, do you want to follow up on that?
Just to emphasise the point you made, Chairman, about the car park situation. It is probably one of the biggest issues this council has faced, and reputational damage and issues for the council in quite some years. So I'm personally very interested to see the report, and I hope we can come to the bottom of what went wrong and what we can learn from it as soon as possible. I hope it will come forward in the not too distant future to this committee.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Bates. You can rest assured we will want a report as full as possible, as quickly as possible, and learn from any mistakes that were made. Right, any other questions or comments on this item? No? In that case, could I move the recommendation, which is that we note the report? As always, I'm not sure how you can not note it, but just for show of hands, do we agree to note it? Thank you very much. Review of anti-fraud and corruption policy. Obviously, there is some overlap with item 7, which is the review of the whistleblowing policy. But for convenience, what I'm intending to do is to take them separately. But obviously, I suspect when we get to item 7, the discussion might be a bit shorter because there would have been some overlapping discussion. So item 6, the review of anti-fraud and corruption policy. Mr. Baldwin, over to you.
Thank you. This is simply an update and a refresh of an existing policy. Clearly, fraud and corruption is something that is quite important, along with cybersecurity is probably one of the more topical things that the society and the economy in general faces in the current climate. And so it's important that we have a policy on this, and one that we find appropriate. There are relatively few changes from the previous version, and those are noted in paragraph 3.1. I think it's fairly self-explanatory, but I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. Yes, it is actually, I think, remarkably straightforward, your report, so thank you for that. And it seems to me, as we discussed at the briefing, this is a balance between identifying, preventing, detecting, equally and not going too far the other way, and people, as it says in the report, making, I better use your words, abuse of the process by raising unfounded malicious allegations that will be regarded as a serious disciplinary matter. So it is a balance, is it not, So really, I invite members to have any questions or comments. But I think the report as it stands is clear, but nonetheless amendable by members of this committee at this time. Any questions or comments? No? There you are, Mr. Baldwin. Well done. In which case, members, can I put it to you that the committee approves the revised anti-fraud and corruption policy attached to Appendix 1. And just separately to that, Mr. Baldwin, it's not part of the recommendation, but I think the review frequency does need to be a bit more frequent than it has been, because I understand this was last reviewed in 2016. My advice would be nearer the 2 years, which is actually, I think, part of the policy. So, members, you approve the plea by show of hands? Thank you. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. And then that takes us on to item 7, the whistleblowing policy, and Ms Stroud is going to present this one.
Thank you, Chair. This policy is brought to the committee as a consultee. The council has to date had a whistleblowing policy that only relates to employees, because that's the statutory protection. And in fact, our employee policy should have correctly been described as a worker policy, because whistleblowing protection in law is actually about workers, not just employees. But nevertheless, moving on from that point of detail, it is recognised that whistleblowing is a sort of easily recognisable word and easily recognisable concept. And it's apparent that a number of local authorities have moved towards having a whistleblowing policy which has a wider audience than just the council's own workforce. And in fact, recently, considering a funding application where the council was the applicant for government grant, I was interested to note that we were being asked for, from a due diligence point of view, we were being asked for our anti-fraud and corruption policy as well as our whistleblowing policy. So looking around and seeing that that some councils, very sensibly have moved towards explaining that blowing the whistle is something that other concerned parties may wish to do. This amended draft attempts to do several things at once. It is a timely review of what was the council's workforce whistleblowing policy. Necessarily, it's therefore gone through the Joint Consultative Committee and will be on its way to the Personnel and General Purposes Committee. But I've taken the opportunity to widen the scope so that the policy can be used and can be published on the council's website for other third parties, whether they be contractors, members of the public, councillors, whoever in that regard. In doing so, it's important to recognise that the statutory protection for whistleblowing around not being subject to a detriment, not being dismissed unfairly, that still can only apply to workers. But nevertheless, a whistleblowing policy, and it was fairly easy to amend it to make it clear that there are a number of routes to raise a concern. And the reason why I think it can be looked upon as a sort of neighbouring policy to anti-fraud and corruption is that it may be that somebody wishes to raise a concern that is very serious, but isn't squarely finance and corruption, finance and corruption, that's unfortunately phrasing. Is it anti-fraud and corruption? It may be a slightly different kind of malpractice. The council, of course, has a number of other routes for raising concerns, so we don't want to undermine those. And if, for example, somebody has a safeguarding concern, they should use the safeguarding policy. If somebody has a regular concern about service delivery, they should use the council's complaints policy, and so forth. So whistleblowing should still be viewed as a special category of protection. But nevertheless, this set of amendments does two different things: tidies up some of the provisions, strengthens some of the reassurances around confidentiality, increases the scope of and clarifies the scope of people to whom the whistle can be blown, but also makes it clear that third parties may use the policy. So, Chair, if I may just add in conclusion, we've got a little bottleneck of things coming through the committee system in November, December. So JCSE have already looked at it. They've given some feedback. That feedback has been incorporated in the revised draft, which will be seen by Personnel and General Purposes on the 14th. Right. But that's come after your published version. So if I may just clarify what those additional points were. Please. So first of all, the Joint Consultative and Safety Committee said that the first section we should expand slightly and explain what is whistleblowing versus all the other routes which I've set out in Appendix 1. So just a bit more signposting about which route to go down.
Yeah, yeah.
And the second point that the Joint Consultative and Safety Committee made was just to strengthen the hand of sort of independence. Who would you blow the whistle to independent of the council? The draft had proposed the statutory officers because, of course, they are themselves subject to their own professional codes of ethics. But it was recognised that somebody wholly independent might be beneficial. So I had added reference into the external auditors, that's still in there. But there's also a proposal that we look for another fully independent route. The suggestion is we could look at the independent person for standards, but obviously that's not something that the legislation sets them up to do. They may be very happy to do that, but obviously I haven't managed to fully explore that yet. But the recommendation from JCSE was ultimately to find another independent route. So I think that, in summary, those are effectively the changes. And it's not a significant set of changes, but I don't think this is a policy that the Audit and Governance Committee would have looked at before, and I thought it was timely in light of the previous item.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think you're absolutely right to bring it to the Audit and Governance Committee. I think we are interested in it. And I also take your point about an independent element. I think the general public always find it extraordinary, and we have seen, not here, but in other places of the country, where when the organisation investigates complaints against itself, then if it's not done properly, as it hasn't been in certain cases, then problems grow and they become almost a crisis. We've seen that in Metropolitan Police and elsewhere. So investigating yourselves sometimes is of necessity, but I think you're absolutely right to raise the issue of an independent element, because otherwise, how do you know what's being investigated has been properly investigated? It's a very difficult one, but again, it may be balanced, but equally, I think at the moment, it looks as though, I suspect it's probably about right. Members of the committee, any questions or comments from yourselves? No? Well, there we are, Mr. Addo, you've got a double whammy tonight. Members are happy with what's done. I think it's been thoughtfully done. So again, thank you for that report. So the recommendation is that the committee comments on the revised draft whistleblowing policy. We have none other than to endorse what's been written, which is subject to review. So with that, I move the recommendation. Those in favour? And that's unanimous again. Thank you very much, members of the committee. Right, and unusually, we have an additional item referred to us by full council last week, and it is about really dealing with public involvement, public participation, public representation. The council has had a debate on that, so I don't think we want to reopen that debate. It's been referred to us to try and accommodate what the council's motion said, or we think what it said, and to take account also of any comments in the debate on that motion. Mr. Stroud, if you'd like to introduce that, then I'll call in Councillor Bates because he had his hand up, but if you could just present your report first.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is introduced as an urgent item following referral from full council. The report sets out, by way of context, the motion that went to council and recognises that the motion was receiving broad support subject to an amendment that it be referred to Audit and Governance for detailed consideration of the drafting, so that didn't need to be all finalised on the night, so to speak. Proposing some track changes, I've set them out in relation to both the council rules of procedure, which is part 4 of our constitution, and then the committee rules of procedure, which is part 5. And they are intended to be shown in track changes, and we had a little bit of a technical problem when they first went up, so I'm just hoping everybody's seen the track changes version. Yeah, good. Okay, great. As I say, the proposed amendments attempt to honour the spirit of the motion and where appropriate the actual language, but just to embody the text within our existing sections of the Constitution. It's also important to try and recognise the role of the committee system in these amendments. So the proposer of the motion was keen to ensure that there was a clear signal given to the public that the council values public participation. What the drafting attempts to do is effectively then close the loop where somebody has come and presented a question or a petition. What happens with that ultimately? And responding to one of the points that was made in the chamber about the mandate that an individual may or may not have, under our committee system, individual councillors and indeed our officers, we don't have a particular officer scheme of delegation. So it's important that those matters where a response is given don't stray into policy making or opinion. Exactly. That would be a matter to be referred back to the relevant committee. Exactly. So I've attempted in the drafting just to close that loop where a question or a petition may be given a response by the chair or the mayor or whoever, or they may designate an officer. That individual is required to then report that back to the relevant committee or council, just for transparency that was the answer they've given. But that if it requires debate, requires opinion or a policy matter, then it can be referred to the relevant committee. Not shall be, but can be. That's the substance. I know, Chair, you've got a point to make, which I would appreciate. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. And what I would propose to do, colleagues, is to just concentrate on the track changes. We don't want to debate tonight on the whole constitution. But there's just one thing I just want to mention at the beginning, where I think my own view is that the track changes have genuinely tried to deal with the as Ms Stroud said, that we welcome participation, and when people come and make representations or present a petition, they get an answer, and the matter is followed up, which is right and proper, and that should happen. And I think these amendments make that happen. I just have one concern, though, colleagues, and if you could turn to it's page 12 in the report, under paragraph, which it is 10.4.6, if I read that correctly. And it's just one thing that bothers me very much, and I don't think it actually was the intention of the motion or indeed anybody at council. And the section I'm referring to is, this is in the track change, any member may request that the subject matter of the question or petition shall be brought to a future meeting of the council or the appropriate committee, supported by a report from officers. Now, my concern with that is, not that people don't get a response and a reply, obviously, they should, they must, and they will. But this, I think, is open to abuse, but also, I think it's a very dangerous thing to do if we allow any one member can bring an item to the council or to a committee, although the committee system, I think, can absorb that. But for example, if somebody presents a petition at council meeting X, knowing that it can't be discussed or debated in the way they want, but they will know that one member can then bring that to the next council meeting with an officer's report. Obviously, that is going to be discussed and debated and maybe turned into a quasi-motion. So instead of having 4 or 5 motions, as we often do have, we get to the end of the council agenda and they've got all these other items on of previous petitions that obviously can't be debated on the night, but have been left to the following meeting. And obviously we're all politicians and they're 4 political parties. So what I can foresee, that is rather a very unwise, open-ended commitment. And it's almost endless because anybody can bring a petition, fine, this is what we want, but that doesn't mean you can then turn that into an item on the full council agenda. We have a committee system which I think can easily accommodate that. But full council, I would urge colleagues not to go down that road, because council meetings, sometimes we think they're too long at the moment. If you've got all these previous petition items coming back to the next meeting, then I don't know how we're going to control the council agenda, because it does say the question or petition shall be brought to a future meeting, shall be, by one member. And remember, there's 35 of us, so all I'm saying is I think that should be amended to read to the committee or the appropriate committee rather than council and committee. That would be my amendment of that amendment. But over to colleagues. For Councillor Bayliss was first, then Councillor Bissett and Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Ali, then Councillor Lamb. Right, we might as well go around that way. Councillor Bayliss.
get your turn in as well. I thought the motion at council was about the fact that sometimes people, members of the public come, they say something to us and we basically listen in silence and that's the end of the matter. And that the request was really about, acknowledging that the public, a member of the public had turned up, either presented a petition or asked a question, or, that there was some sort of response to the question, so which I thought was perfectly reasonable. I think I think the point you've just made is one that worries me, because that's not about the member of the public. That's about a councillor, then using that as an opportunity to, to jump on it and push it in. I think the Constitution is already there, obviously. If you want to bring forward a notice of motion on something, any member is at liberty to bring that, and if they've got a seconder, it will be debated. So we have a system that I don't think that element is necessary, and I think we should delete that element, because I don't think it was the rationale for the what we debated at council, and I don't think it's necessary in here either. I slightly have a concern about the mayor is meant to be non-political, meant to be above party politics on as much as possible. That's not always possible. Sometimes he or she gets dragged into a political debate. And I just think, again, I was reading, it says, and this is 10.44, any petition shall be received who will be obliged to acknowledge its receipt, and that's all right, and will endeavour to respond in writing to its content. I wonder what that would look like. I mean, I know it says later that it would be restricted to council policy. Our policies are not entirely nailed down, and one member's interpretation of our policy and another's may be completely different. So I do have a slight worry about how they're going to do that. I wish it were the next bit, the mayor may delegate the formal response to a petition to an officer. I think that should be, the mayor will delegate it to an officer for that, because I just think we're asking the mayor to get involved in a contentious issue. Let's face it, if somebody turns up and they want to talk about, I don't know, the war in Iraq or wherever it might be, and we've suddenly got the mayor writing back saying, their views on this, that or the other. And I'm just trying to keep the civic head out of day-to-day politics. But I suppose I don't want this to come across as negative about the motion. I do believe we should acknowledge them, and I think we should try our very best to appear, that we're listening. We're all listening. We do genuinely are concerned about those. But I think I would. I would put on the table just this question about endeavour to respond by the mayor themselves. It could be changed to a formal response to the petition will be provided by an officer. The response shall be given and reported at the next meeting. I think for me, that just keeps the mayor out of it. Otherwise, you're then going to get... The other thing is that we share the mayoralty in this council very well, and I'm delighted we do. Took me 15 years to get us to do that, and we do eventually. But you could now have a mayor of one party being forced to write a letter of which they disagree with the council's policy on something, but having to sign it and send it back. You could get that bit of entrapment. A Labour mayor writing back saying, this is the council's policy, something they personally disagree with. So I put that just in the mix, really, that maybe it would be better for an officer to reply to, setting out the council's position rather than the mayor.
I think actually, Councillor Baker, that is helpful, because obviously the council does have policies. I agree with Councillor Baker, sometimes they're not as clear as they should be, but we're all human. But nonetheless, if we have a policy, I can't see why an officer can't simply tell somebody what the policy is without comment one way or the other. This is the council policy. If you don't like it, then get on to your politicians to change it. I think the other point on that, after what Councillor Baker has said, it says, the response that has been given shall be reported to the next meeting of the council. And my question to that is that for information or debate? Because I think that needs to be clarified, because if it's reported to the council, it will be very difficult, in all honesty, for a mayor to say, we reported it, you're not going to discuss it, you're not going to debate it, you can't ask questions on it. So I think if it's for information, then I think it needs to say here, reported to the council for information only. Otherwise, by hook or by crook, there will then be a debate on it. And some mayors may exercise their discretion more than others. So I think we've got a really, Councillor Bayes, I think, is suggesting that the mayor will delegate the formal response to the petition to an officer. So that makes it, there's the petition, goes through the mayor to the officer. So that gives a kind of element of neutrality and objectivity, because all the officer is doing is saying what the policy is. And then I would like to add in that for information only if it's going to the council. Remember, council is all the members, it's a pretty hefty agenda every time. And I've already mentioned my own item about the coming back via a member, because as Councillor Bailey said quite correctly, that's bringing the member in, and we're talking about the public here. So I think we just, again, not go too far down that road. I think Councillor Ditter was next. Yeah,
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to also say that I'd like to agree with your amendment. I think that it should be we've got committee systems put in place for a particular reason. They're not just invented for the sake of it. So everything should be put in place via the committees, and it should go through the appropriate channels rather than everything coming to full council. Like you said, no one wants to be there at midnight discussing something 4 weeks ago that's irrelevant to the full council. That's all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ditter. I think that's entirely right. I mean, the committee system was set up specifically to, in a sense, be the first port of call. You know, they're not just add-ons, they are the way through which policy is made and decisions are made. So the committees are not unimportant, they're very important. Councillor Bissett.
Thank you, Chair. I found this whole matter to be very educational. It's just taught me the danger of trying to rewrite bits of the Constitution in a motion. So thank you to everybody for that. I agree with the comments made by Mark and yourself, Alan, about you know, those changes that you recommend. I think they're very sensible. But on the whole, I mean, I think you've done a brilliant job, Sean. It's not quite right, but we're getting there. I think it's important, once you think you've got the wording right, just have a double check that the two sections are completely in accordance with each other. I mean, obviously, where they obviously should differ, then they differ, but there are places where they should be the same.
Councillor Bissett, just sorry to interrupt you, you're absolutely right on that point. There is overlap, and what I would suggest is that if we make amendments or changes to the first part, they must be reflected in the second part. Yes. They must be consistent.
Yes, where appropriate.
Absolutely right, yeah.
And one final thing, I'm just wondering why in the section that for the committees, this is on page 24, we've got one paragraph in red crossed out. Is that just an oversight?
Councillor Bissett, could you just give me a reference? I would imagine it's just a reordering point that track changes is showing it as deleted, whereas it's just moved.
It's number 1046.
Page 24.
Is that
Page 24.
Just above
committee procedure rules should not apply in
Yeah.
any case where committee procedure rules 6 or 7 apply.
Yes. Oh, sorry. I found that to be a completely extraneous reference to nothing at all in the earlier section of the policy. I should have said that.
Okay.
I found it to be a complete red herring, so I took the bold step of deleting it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I found it quite disturbing that, as other members have already mentioned, that that one member could bring something unbudgeted to a committee or want that it's done, and even a member of public. It's something that we have this system, we have structure, and we need order, and we have to remember that other people have to carry out our instructions, and the randomness must be quite difficult for them to deal with. As Sean will testify, at the end of the last council meeting, I did ask if it was possible that we could set up a workshop to go through how we would present this sort of information, that if we wanted to make a change and we were unsure as to how to do it, how a member would bring that forward through the committee system, because obviously we're not on all different committees and we don't understand how some of the other committees work. So I think it would be very beneficial, particularly when we get a new batch of councillors in, that if they were given an overview of how to address certain points, just as a sort of exercise, I thought it would be very useful.
Thank you, Councillor Lance, very constructive suggestions. Thank you. Councillor Ali.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for being late. I got stuck in car park just on the road. It's completely chaos there. It took me 45 minutes just to get out of the car park, you know.
Was it one of ours?
I agree with Councillor Mark Bellis that I personally believe that every member of public must be heard and must be responded in appropriate way. But that doesn't mean that if someone turns up in one council meeting and got an agenda, and you know, and next council meeting we have all these papers, you know, already got a lot of stuff to do. So I think the procedure should be followed, and the agenda or anything comes from the public should go to appropriate committee or officers to deal with it. It's not to do with full council. So I completely agree with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ali. That's very helpful support as well. Councillor Lamb.
Thank you very much. I was thinking of this actually on the train, because I looked at an interesting poll that came out today, which asks how much control do you feel you have over the important decisions that affect your neighbourhood and your local area? And only 6% said a great deal, 18% said a fair amount, 49% said not very much, and 26% said none at all. So that seems to add up to a lot of people feel that they don't have any input into what's going on in their local area. So any proposal to extend that kind of involvement, I think, is to be welcomed. But at the same time, as we've had this conversation previously when we talked about sort of people's assemblies and various other things, you know, the power should lie with the elected representatives, because we are an elected, obviously a representative democracy. And I think what this does, and I think the changes that have been proposed, I think gets the balance right. I think we should listen to the people, but ultimately the job of running the city and making those decisions is the role of elected councillors, and we are then held accountable for our actions. And I suppose the other question I was thinking to myself as I was reading this through is, how much will this be used? I mean, I'm trying to think, you know, in my time being on the council now 12 years, and I'm trying to think how many petitions. So we do have, you know, public participation, not a huge amount. How many petitions have we had in this time? And I was sort of a bit concerned about, would this have any kind of impact on officer time? Because obviously one of the concerns that are often raised by councillors is that, you know, officers are very thinly spread. If we're giving them more work to do, could that sort of distract or detract from the work of the council in its broader sense? I was a bit concerned about that. And I just sort of wondered, you know, if this becomes publicised, this new change, will we therefore get more involvement? That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it'd be interesting to think, you know, we don't get a huge amount now, but once this is publicised, will we get more people asking questions? Will we get more people doing petitions? Which is a good thing on one level, but will it have an impact on officer time? And the other thing about petitions is there's no threshold here. And I suppose the question I was asking myself is, if someone turns up with a bus ticket with 3 signatures on it, is that a petition? You know, when Parliament has petitions, but obviously there are thresholds, aren't there? You know, a certain number of signatures has to be required for a response, a certain number of signatures must be required for a debate. And I'm wondering whether there's any scope to put something like that in, because I know, as all of us as councillors, we get people who have a bit of a hobby horse. There's nothing wrong with that. And I've had local residents come up to me with a scrappy bit of paper with sort of 10 sort of friends that they've got to sign a piece of paper, and they say, well, look, I have a mandate from the people of my area for this. And of course, it's just a kind of, and I'm just a bit concerned, it's not vexatious exactly, but would we get inundated with petitions which aren't really representative of any kind of groundswell of support?
Thank you, Councillor. Well, I think that's a genuine concern, actually. So this is why I'm just urging element of caution. Well, not so much caution as realism. That's all I'm trying to. Obviously, nothing is set in stone, whatever we decide tonight. But Councillor Bayliss, yeah.
I'm glad that it seems to be one of my suggestions, and others are find in favour, and we've got agreement on this. I've actually got a suggested amendment how we do it to that first couple of paragraphs anyway, that I'd like to move as amendment to this, if that's okay.
Yeah. First of all, I'm just going. Mr. Stroud wants clarification. So, if you'd like to seek clarification first.
The curse of the mics tonight. Thank you, everybody. It's been really helpful to discuss it, and clearly we have all been drafting and thinking at speed on this. So, all I would just acknowledge is that my attempts to add in provisions were to close the loop, but I can see that in so doing so, I might have made a perpetuating loop, and there's a clear view that nobody wants that. So it's been very helpful. I'm very grateful for that feedback. I suppose the point I just wanted clarification on is that we've got a helpful proposal in relation to the mayor must delegate to an officer. What is the committee's view about carrying that provision into the committee procedural side? So it's not the chair who gives the answer, the chair must delegate to the officer. That's a little bit of a different point, but again, we have a committee system, not a cabinet and leader model. So again, you may feel it's appropriate that it's an officer delegation there.
I think that's a very good point, but I think
just getting a steer.
I think it was something that Councillor Bissett was hinting at, where I responded, said where we need to be consistent.
Yes.
And I think if we're saying the principle is that whoever is chairing it might be the mayor, in which case it goes to an officer. It's chair of a committee, it goes to an officer. That is consistent and understandable. If not, and we have a different system, then we'll need to have a debate about why is it not the mayor, but it can be a committee chair. And so that's the risk. But Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would be a bit concerned if I was a chair or maybe the vice chair substituting, that I would be committing the council to something that turns out they cannot actually achieve once you've taken legal advice or looked at budgetary things. So I think it's definitely something you just don't want to react to yourself unless it's being looked at properly, and there might not be the money or the officer time to investigate something, or it might previously have been looked at. And
Councillor Bayliss and Councillor Bissett.
I have my proposal then, which is under 10.44. It will now read: any petition shall be received by the mayor, who will be obliged to acknowledge its receipt. Full stop. The mayor will delegate the formal response to the petition to an officer. The response that has been given shall be reported to the next meeting of the council for information. We add for information.
Yes.
And then on 10.45, my only amendment is to also add for information at the end of that paragraph. Of that one. And then I'm happy to to concur with yours, which is to delete under 10.46 the final sentence that says any member may request that the subject matter So delete all of that, and then I guess I'd be replicating that in the committee section element, which would be to that it will be responded to by an officer rather than by the chairman. And I do that in the spirit of trying to find something that we can all agree to.
Yes, just bear with me a second, colleague. Mr. Strauss put it up on the screen just so that.
There's a question whether we still need all this caveat then about confined to factual statements only.
Which page is that on? Right, colleagues, we're looking at page.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think we all need to be on the same page literally, as it were. But I think
You'll get there, don't worry. It's flashing.
All right. Okay. It's good. So there's just a question, bearing in mind those helpful proposals, whether we still feel we need the paragraph which caveats that the response must be confined to factual statements, policy positions, anything, an expression of interest must be referred back to committee. Do we still need all that safeguard? Yep. Okay. Fine.
Yeah, I think we do, because when an officer's responding, then they're not at liberty to make political comments either.
Yeah.
So just needs to be made clear. Yeah. Right. Well, colleagues, well, thank you for that very helpful debate, because I think we've got the germ or an actual amendment which works. But just before we move that, Councillor Bissett, you wanted to come in?
I just wanted to say that at the full council meeting, there was a discussion about how many signatures a petition should have. And is that something that we want to incorporate into the changes in order to be taken seriously, if you like? I think it was 100.
Yeah, I looked back through this, sorry, Chair, I looked back through this and I thought I'd seen 100 somewhere, and then when I looked back, I couldn't see it anywhere. I'm sure there was 100 in Tom's second version.
It wasn't in the original motion, but I think it was an amendment.
I think Councillor Lamb is correct. I remember somebody saying that 100, and I thought, well, that might be a bit high, but at least it's understandable and it's a figure. Councillor Lawrence, can you remember anything differently?
He had brought an amended piece of paper to the council, which is part of what I wanted to raise as the workshop. You can't just, yes. So it was an additional piece of paper that he brought.
But members, if I may just clarify, at Appendix 3 of our papers tonight is the piece of paper that was presented on the night, which is why I've labelled it Public Participation Motion presented 29th of November. That is the second version that was tabled on the night. And the only amendment that was agreed related to referral to our committee tonight. I'm not, I'm not, forgive me for being a bureaucrat, but I'm not on notice to give you advice about number of signatures on a petition. Could I recommend that any amendments that we do make, of course, we can commit to keeping under review and look at further at a future meeting?
Yes, could I just say to colleagues, I think actually if we move the amendment as we seem to be agreeing on, that will actually take account of it. Because obviously having a limit on the number of petitioners is, I think, designed to erase frivolous ones or how too many. But given we've got a procedure which really obviates the need to rule out frivolous ones, because the procedure will take care of it itself. Councillor Ditter, you want to come in? Well, if you're agreeing with me, Councillor Ditter, that's absolutely fine. Right, colleagues. So what? Can I just get a consensus? I think it'd be very helpful, and I think Councillor Bayliss and the rest of you, thank you very much. What we're suggesting is 10.4. We're on the first part here. 10.4.4 is where the mayor will delegate the formal response to the petition to an officer, and at the end of that, it says. To the next meeting of the council for information only. And then the next one was on 10.4.6, where basically, I think Councillor Bayes is right, because what we're simply doing, where it says any member may, we simply delete it. So that's a very simple amendment. And I think that's where we've got. Now, are members happy with that? I think there's a consensus on that. Yes. Yeah. Right. So, well, if we can agree on that, I think that's good progress so far. So, but can I just put that to the meeting that we're happy with that, and that vote is unanimous. Thank you very much. Right now, are there any other points on that that members would like to raise in terms of the track changes only, because we're not discussing the whole constitution? Right, if we go to part 5 then, which is the committee side of it. Again, I think we've had a debate, and I think what I would suggest to the committee is that the changes we've made in terms of the mayor and in terms of where it goes and how it goes, are replicated in exactly the same way as for a committee chair and the committee. In other words, not the mayor and the committee chair and the council and the committee are one and the same in terms of our amendments. Are members happy with that? So, Ms Stroud, if I could put that to you, and then if you could make the same amendments, again, adding those 3 changes we've made about who replies, that it's for information only, and it doesn't go to back to the council, and it therefore wouldn't go back to the committee. We don't mind it going to a committee, though.
I'm happy to make those proposals, Chairman, to the committee procedural rules as well. Yeah, I can read them out if you wish. No, you're happy with that? We're all.
Our colleagues, first of all, let me ask colleagues, are colleagues clear on what we're now proposing for the committee section as opposed to the full council stroke mayoral section? And Ms Stroud, are you clear as well? Because you're going to have to write this up and Margaret is going to have to minute it.
You'll get there.
Well, if that is the case then, colleagues, I'm very grateful to you because I think we've significantly improved it. And I say thanks to Ms Stroud for coming up with the first draft, but I think we've significantly improved it with minimum fuss and, importantly, unanimity. So it's not in any way to do with party politics at all. It's just procedural matters. Good. Thank you very much. So is that clear? Good. Right, colleagues. And that then takes us to item 9, any other business, which this is the good thing, which in the opinion of the chairman is of sufficient urgency as to warrant consideration. And I don't consider any matter that I've just to be of urgency at 8:30 on a very cold night. Colleagues, thank you very much. I think a very constructive debate tonight. Very grateful to you. And the meeting is now closed at 8:25 according to that clock. Thank you very much.